Did you ever feel like throwing your knitting machine through the window because all it does is drop stitches and tuck stitches everywhere and you can't get a project to work? Well, guys, believe me or not, I've been there too. When I first bought my Sentro 48 knitting machine, I had no idea on how to use it and I was dropping stitches like crazy. And then I watched this video tutorial and there was a quick and easy fix for my tuck stitches and drop stitches, and I never had one again. So I'll be sharing that with you at the end of the video. But firstly, I want to talk about a few things that can make you have tension problems on your knitting machine and also drop stitches. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the yarn. So the yarn makes a big difference when talking about tension and drop stitches. So this is the first thing. The second thing that I want to talk about that can cause you tension problems and drop stitches as well is the tensioner of your knitting machine. This is the tensioner and this is the guide. They are two very important pieces when talking about tension of knitting machines and yarn feeding to the machine. And the third thing that I want to talk about is wear and tear of the pieces and also manufacturing problems of these machines, okay? And then to finish this video, I'm gonna show you when to fix a tuck stitch in a drop stitch and when to just restart a project, because I know a lot of people ask this in my Facebook group and I know it's a very common question, so I'm gonna show you how to easily fix it and when not to fix it and just restart it for you guys to know. So let's talk about yarn option, guys. When I first bought my Sentro 48 and also my Addi 46, I was still living in Australia, so I used to go to Spotlight and just pick every yarn you can think about and just try on my machine. And so I tried most yarns. There's a lot of yarns that you can find in Australia and in America, the same yarns like Mandala Ombre, like the Lion brand, they have a lot there. And so I tried them all. And then I came to Brazil, and in Brazil we have a lot of yarn options, but they are very similar to the ones you can find in Australia. They only have different names. So this one thing that you have to realize is that most of the yarn brands, they manufacture their yarn in Turkey, India and China mainly, which means that whatever country you go, you're gonna find very similar types of yarn. It's just really trying to find which brand, which one is which, but they all make in the same place, so you're gonna find this very similar yarn. So one thing that I realized after trying all this yarn that I did in these two countries is that the weight and the number of meters mean a lot when talking about knitting machine. And I realized that when you have a 100 grams ball like this one, and if you have at least 200 meters, it will probably work on your knitting machine. Now, if you have 100 grams ball like this one, this is 100 grams, and this one has 140 meters, and you can see it's very bulky. Also, another thing that you can look for when you're purchasing yarn more online, because you can only see the pictures, you can't really touch the yarn, is the number of the needles that it asks for. I don't know if you can see this, but here it says 9 to 10 millimeters knitting needle, which means that this is gonna be way too thick for this machine. There's another thing that you can look for, and this is a cotton blend of yarn that works really well on the knitting machine. Like cotton, when they are blends, they tend to work well as well. This one is 50 grams to 150 meters, so it's 3 times more. That means it's probably gonna work, okay? There's another thing about yarn that you have to look for as well, is how soft and silky this yarn is. Like these yarns, the chenille yarns and velvet yarns, they tend to work well on the knitting machine. Of course, there's yarns, velvet yarns, that they are very thick and bulky, so that's why you have to look first how many grams and how many meters. Second thing, you have to look how silky the yarn is. If it's very silky and nice on the skin, it's gonna probably go well on the machine. And the third thing, what's saying on the label. All these yarns that I'm showing you here, they say from 4 to 5 millimeters. Anything bigger than 5 millimeters won't work on the knitting machine, will be too bulky for the knitting machine. And anything under will work. I have here a mohair yarn. Mohair yarn is normally like 100 grams, you're gonna get like 500 meters. It's a very fine yarn, as you can see. And this will work on the Sentro knitting machine. It will work fine. It's just the only thing, it's gonna be a little hard to get this tensioner to work. So you probably need another tensioner, and I'm gonna talk about tensioners in a second. And also, as you can see here, this is how it's gonna look like. So every yarn that's when the needles on the label say, this one probably doesn't have it, but it would say probably 2 to 3 millimeters needles. That means the yarn will look like this when you make it on your knitting machine. Which is for this project, this mohair sweater, I wanted it to look like this, but just be aware of that. And what you can do, once you get more used to this machine, you can double this yarn and work with 2 strands. That will work fine too, because 2 strands will still be less thick than this yarn here. And there's another thing that you can look for as well, and that's why I think it's really good for you if you don't understand anything about yarn. Just go to a yarn shop. And at the yarn shop, what you have to look for is all the things that I just said before, plus how soft it feels against your skin. Because what happens is, the thicker and the more like harsh on your skin the yarn is, the worse it's gonna be for your machine as well. The softer the yarn, the better it will go on your machine. And the reason why is because when the yarn is soft, it just will slide through your needles that are plastic easier. So go to the shop, test some yarns, and go with just take photos of with your phone, so you know when you get home and you want to buy online the yarn, you know which yarn to buy. So what you have to look for, how soft the yarn is. Try to look for colors. Sometimes even Red Heart has colors that work really well on these machines, and it has colors that doesn't work at all. Like, for instance, this yarn here, because of the dyeing process, I think, of this color, this specific color, some colors of this yarn I can use like butter, and some colors like these sprayed colors, they don't work at all. So when they don't work and you still want to use them, there's 3 options you can use. You can, firstly, you can wash it. To wash yarn, you have to put in a bag and make and put through your umbrella just to open it, because otherwise you won't dry. And wash with softener in the cold water, okay? Or by hand. By hand, I would even think even better in a bucket. Also, you can use dry sheets, and you can use silicone ear plugs. You put the silicone ear plug here and just let the yarn slide through the silicone plug as well. A lot of people use this solution. So that's my best advice for yarns. And now let's move to the second thing that you have to look for, and is the tensioner, how to tension each yarn the right way. Now, before we go to the tensioners, if you find this content helpful to you, make sure you share with friends that like knitting machines as well. And also make sure you subscribe to my channel. I have a lot of beautiful patterns you guys can make. That's what I love making, and it's all for you for free if you want to just make on a medium size. And I have the patterns normally going from sizes extra small to extra large. I have a lot of free tutorials on my website and articles as well. It's knittingmachinepatterns.com. You can go there and check it out all out. And make sure you leave me a comment, let me know your experience with these knitting machines. So the second thing that can give you problems with these knitting machines is the tensioner. Like this tensioner here has 3 spots that you can use your yarn, and you have to choose the right one for each yarn. So the best thing to do when you get a yarn, put the yarn through each one of these holes here and just see how easy the yarn slides through it. If it's too tight, it's gonna be hard to pull, and then just put on the next one. If it's still too tight, just try the other one. And keep trying. Once you find a good spot for it, make sure you don't change during the project. Otherwise, you're gonna have one piece of the project in one tension, and that's gonna be wider and more loose. And you're gonna have the second part of your project with another tension, and that's gonna be like your project's not gonna be even, it's gonna be uneven and different on the top and on the bottom. So choose one that you like, make a sample. You know, knitting, it's a lot of experience. The more experience you get, the more used you get with the machine, and the less stitches you're gonna drop, and the less tension problems you're gonna have. Tensioners, I just saw on Amazon a new tensioner that they have there, and I'm gonna leave the link down in the description below and put the image here on the side for you guys to see. I haven't tried yet, but I have something very similar, and I'm gonna show you guys here. This Kado just gave me this yarn winder, and it has a tensioner here that I'm gonna show you a video that I made. I used this tensioner here to feed the knitting machine. I just placed it here. I'm gonna show you the video. And this is very similar to the one that I'm gonna show you here. It's just, of course, it's more expensive because this is an electric yarn winder, which I would highly recommend. It makes beautiful cakes, okay? And I have a link down in the description below that you can get with 20% discount. So I use this to feed the knitting machine, and I also use this same one as just a feeder, not going through this, to use the Addi egg, and it worked for the Addi egg. I think for the first time use my Addi egg handle and not stop using it, because Addi eggs, they're just a nightmare to find tension, and that's because they don't have a proper tension holder. Anyway, this product that I'm gonna leave the link down in the description below, you can fix to a table, and so you can use in any machine that you have. And I tried this one, and this one works well, so I think that one will work well as well. You can untie the tension with the screws on the top, which I think is really cool as well. So this is what I want to talk about tensioners. I think you need an extra something to use as a tension holder other than this one, to make your life easier, really. You can work with this, and a lot of people do. I just prefer, if I have only this, I'm gonna use my hands to tension my projects. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about that can give you problems as well, and I had this happening before, where this piece here tears a lot, and that's because of the yarn and some acrylic yarn, because they are plastic as well. They go through here, and if you make just beanies, you go work only on one side, this is gonna tear off, and it's gonna make little holes in this part here. So what's gonna happen is not gonna guide the yarn in the right place for the needles to pick it up and so the needles will miss the yarn. The same happens, and I got this girl once, she sent me a message on Instagram asking like, oh, my mom can't use her machine because there's something wrong with it, she just purchased it and I don't know what's going on. And then she sent me a video, and I saw in the video that one of the needles, and it was just only one needle that she was having problems with, and one of the needles had a different shape. And then I just found a place for her to buy, this was here in Brazil, for her to purchase a new set of needles. She did that, and then the machine worked. So this is another thing that you have to look for. Sometimes they come with manufacturing issues on the gears, which is inside, and different shapes of needles. So sometimes these little hooks here, some of them have different shapes and they will skip stitches all the time. So this is another thing that you have to look for. So it's mainly three things. This piece here that guides the yarn, that doesn't happen much on Addi knitting machines because the plastic doesn't tend to tear as much as this one. The shape of the needles, and also problems inside it with the gears. Sometimes there are pieces of plastics from the cut when the machine cuts or something, I don't know, but they are just there, and then when you open your machine you can see because it's just different from the rest. Sometimes you can get rid of it, sometimes it's just you need to send it back. So I have a video explaining exactly how to open your machine and also what products to use to grease your machine. Okay, it's important as well to keep your machine clean if it's tangling yarn and if it's hard to crank. See, my machine I just cleaned and it's working beautiful. So this is another thing that can give you problems as well. Let's go. I want to show you when to fix tuck stitches and drop stitches in a project, and when not to fix it at all and just restart it. To explain you drop stitches and tension, I just put a yarn through and started this project, and then I put the yarn through a very loose tension here so you guys can see what's gonna happen. So I'm going to start making the rows, and as you can see there's a lot of yarn here, there's way too much yarn, so I'm gonna go through a few stitches because the problem normally happens on the second row. And here it's gonna start to happen. So because there was too much yarn here, the loop was too loose, it couldn't go all the way down to the bottom, and then you're gonna have two loops in one needle, and that's called a tucked stitch. And this is all happening because my tension is too loose. Again, another tuck stitch. Okay, so you can't really fix this. You have to open the project because, of course, right on the beginning, even if you were at the end of the project and this starts to happen, you have to remove the whole project and restart again because this is gonna be too hard to fix. Okay, now if I just change the position of the yarn to this second one, and now there's no solution for this, you just have to remake it. It already gets a little better. But because here the stitches are too loose, they won't go to the right place before the second one comes in. So this happens when your tension is too loose. How to fix it? Just restart it. So let's restart, and then I'm gonna show you what happens if the tension of your centro is too tight. Now in this situation here, I'm using a very tight tension, and I'm gonna show you what's gonna happen. I use the 3 holes to guide the yarn through, and I'm just going to start making it. As you can see, it's already getting really hard to crank the machine. And it's gonna see, it's already making noise on the gears, and this is because it's hard for the needles to bring the yarn down to the bottom because it's just the stitch underneath, the loop underneath is just too tight to slide down. In a perfect situation, let me show you here now. And this was the advice that I got from that video. So the loop has to be right on the bottom as it is there. Let me show you here. Right on the bottom of the needle. So it will slide from the middle to the bottom, just like this. And then the second yarn from the feeder has to come and go inside the hook, and then it will be released in the next row. So what happens as well, when the yarn's too tight, the needle can't put the last loop to the bottom, and then it tucks a stitch just like this. Okay, so it's important to have the perfect tension for each yarn. That's why I like to work with my hands. So if you decide if nothing is working for you and you don't have a tensioner yet, just what I advise you to do is first look and see if the needles are making this work of putting the yarn down to the bottom as it goes through, and then grabbing the second loop, and this loop being on the bottom, it's gonna drop on the next stitch, as you can see here. Let me show you here. So see, it's coming out, the loop from the row before is coming out, and then the next one is going to the bottom right there. It's going to the bottom of the needle. Now this is the perfect situation, and that has to happen, otherwise you're gonna have tucked and dropped stitches. So this is what I do every time. I make sure I place a machine on a place where I can look every single stitch, and I just look every single stitch, and also I guide the yarn with my hands. If you have the table tensioner, that works as well, and there's tensioners you can attach here to just, I'm gonna put an image here for you guys to see. That ones work as well. So if you're having tension problems, that's how you fix the tension of your machine. Now if you have dropped stitches here on the beginning, a drop stitch happens when the needle doesn't grab the yarn at all. That can happen because of the shape of the needle. Like I said before, some needles, they come with different shapes from the factory. Just get yourself a few new needles and exchange them. And as well, it happens when the tension is too tight. So I'm gonna go all the way there. What I do is, with this tool here, let me see if you can see, with this tool here, you can, and then just pull it. It's easier to pull a stitch when the needle is in this position other than this position. In this position, it's going to be really hard to fix a stitch because the needle is too far away from your work, and you can even break a needle. So just put it back there, put the yarn back into the yarn guide, bring your machine back a little, and just put the yarn inside the hook. And that way you fix a drop stitch straight away after you saw it, just right after you saw it. Now, if you way down, like if you have 100 rows already made and your project's really big, and then you saw there's a drop stitch or a tuck stitch right on the beginning, just restart the project. So that's why I want you to pay attention when the stitches are getting made, and not just do it watching television or something like that. If you are using a difficult yarn, you have to pay attention at all times, otherwise this is gonna happen. And then just try to use your hands. It's easier to control the tension like that, and it's just really let the yarn slide through your hands. So these are my tips for working with tension on a Sentro knitting machine. I hope that this was helpful for you guys. If you need to clean your machine, if you see your machine is not cranking well anymore, just make sure you check my last video that I'm going to leave the link here for you guys. Leave me your like and subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate all you guys here, and thank you for watching again. I hope you have a beautiful weekend ahead.